Streaming as well.
Oh, excellent. So, hello everyone in the room. Hello everyone on the stream, in case you can hear me. So this is sort of lines up my talk with what Stefan introduced in the keynote. So this is essentially something for me as a developer. I want to set up a development environment on my terms, with my software, developing the applications the way I like it. And this sort of includes something that I never aspired to be, but somehow just happened to become, and this is the Omnius full stack developer. Yeah? With the cloud application programming model, you can, as you'll see in a second, write services and persistence layer pretty easily. I never wanted to do that. Front end is sort of the thing up to service that I like. Now I'm capable of doing it even locally on my machine. And so I guess that's just the natural evolution of things. I have a little script prepared, and I'm not going to walk you through a whole lot of slides. I'll do most of it in code so you can see stuff. And hopefully then understand what kind of a setup this is. And this will be entirely published on the UI5 ecosystem showcase, so you can take it for your projects, reuse them, and hopefully benefit from that in terms of get quickly into developing content and have the tooling out of the way. That's the company I work for. It's called JNS Soft. We're a small tech shop. We're specialists only. There's very few management interference here, so enough of that. How many of you have worked with CAP so far? So most have. Some still not sure? Okay. So what this is, it's, as the name suggests, an application programming model for the Cloud Foundry environment. Enables you by a convention over configuration approach to quickly get going with a UI5 application plus services plus persistence. As you can see here, like the main mantra is that you have 3 different directories, and obviously in app lives the front end, in SRV lives the service, in DB lives the persistence layer. As you can see here also, it runs on Cloud Foundry, so as the name suggests, it's the cloud application programming model. But what you can do is take the entire stack and develop it locally as well. So CAP is CLI first, just as the UI5 tooling, so you can take it and work with it locally. And I think I'll just demo something. Let me make a new folder here, and I'll use Visual Studio Code because it's simply easier. So what the CAP tooling has is a so-called development kit. So all you need to do essentially is start it up via CDS Watch, and you can already see that it starts sort of an instance of itself, watching the directories DB, SRV, app for content, and it has an auto refresh. So once you start actually modeling stuff, it'll pick it up and display it. And we'll just do it, as I said, convention over configuration. I create a new folder called SRV. I create a file in there. Let's call it srv.cds. And already see down there, the CDS tooling recognized it's big enough, you can all see, right? Okay. The CDS tooling recognized, okay, there's content coming in. It's running an in-memory instance of a persistence layer, so you have very fast turnaround times. And obviously, since there's no content yet, it says no service models found. And let's make it a UI5 con service. And in there lives an entity. You can also see it's got code completion if you have the CDS tools installed, so this goes very conveniently. Let's make an entity conference. And in there, let's say you have a key, which is just a string for demonstration purposes. You have a location, which is also a string. And you have a date, let's say, which is date time. And auto-formatting, very nice. As soon as I save this, watch the command line down there. The CDS tooling picks up the service definition. It instantiates an Odata v4 service and provides it here under that URL. So if I fire up a browser window here, if I click on this URL, you'll see a static launch page describing the Odata v4 service. And it comes with a complete metadata instance, obviously, since it's a v4 service. And if I hit the entity conference, let me make it like this so you guys can see. So I got the entity conference going here. I hit conference, and since there's no conference yet, there's no content. But this is Odata v4 out of the box. And it's not only a read service, it's also a full CRUD service that the CDS tooling provides. So if I were to say just a regular folded test, for example, and I put just some generic HTTP calls in there, and I say, for example, post to a local host 4004 UI5 conference. It's an application JSON content that we're expecting. And if I insert there, let's say ID, let me put this to the right so you can compare it to the actual service model. So you have the ID, which is blah. You have the location, which is Brussels. And you have the date. Okay, 2020, 0214, it's, oops, 0214, it's now 1016. And we just make it Zulu time for demonstration purposes. Now, if I issue that call, you can already see the result being displayed on the right. So the framework issues a result, and it's a 201 created. And if I now refresh the CDS page, you can see there's content in the persistence layer. So a full-featured CRUD service in, like, let's say, no time. So far, so good. I think those of you that have used CAB, this is nothing new. For those who haven't seen it, I find it still pretty impressive that things go so quickly. It's like things are out of the way. I can just start developing content. So there's another thing that I probably have to mention. The cool thing about the CDS tooling is you can not only serve Odata v4 out of the box, you can also serve REST requests, regular REST requests. Did you guys know that? If you go CDS serve all models to REST, and let's say we use an in-memory database again, it boots up the same service definition right here as a plain REST instance. So I have no metadata here, I have just endpoints. And the very same insert then, if I issue that one, again, same thing, 201 created, and you have a regular REST service at hand at the same time for free. And there's also an Odata v2 adapter that you can plug in there. I'm not going to do this because otherwise I'll run out of time, just as Peter did, for reusing 3 different kinds of protocols with the same service definition. So Odata v4, v2, and REST. Okay. Remember this URL, so that's the standard URL that the CDS uses for exposing services. We're going to need this later. Back to the idea of how do you use it in conjunction with UI5. Of course, Or let me reuse this here. Let me put some content in. So we have a regular v4 service. And as you can see here, the CDS toolset has a, in Fiori, kind of a preview thingy down here. So if you click this, and there's content in the database, and you annotate it properly, then you were to see actually some stuff in here. I copied the annotations. I'm going to spare you explaining them because I'm confused by them as well. I never actually, well, that's a different story. So let me pick this one up. If I annotate it correctly, I reload the Fiori preview. You should be able to see something while you don't. Probably an insert first. See, and now you got that Brussels conference displayed in a regular UI5 list report pretty easily out of the box. Which is good because it gets you going pretty quickly. For me, it's not good enough out of two reasons. The entire stack with UI5 frontend, with an OData service and a persistence backend is by design loosely coupled. So what's the point in like getting it by convention back into one application and you arbitrarily couple it tightly again? So I'm wondering why. And also at the same time, as a developer, if I change things on the UI5 level, let's say in the application folder, and I put freestyle UI5 content in there, the server restarts itself over and over again, and I'm booting up the same application multiple times, but not necessarily, since I only want the UI to change, or I only want the service to change. I don't want everything to change and reload every time. Even though it's fast, it's too slow and too cumbersome for me. So the idea is to decouple the UI layer with the help of the UI5 tooling and reconnect it to the CAP server running the CAP tooling. And if you look at the UI5 showcase now, you'll see that this thing is already prepared, and I'm going to walk you through how to set it up step by step. So first of all, you have the folder cap, and inside that folder cap, there's a full-blown, well, application programming model application running. So if I go to cap, and I go CDS run, then it does exactly the same thing. It starts up a cap instance at my local host. This time with a non-in-memory adapter, but with a regular SQLite instance, because I'm going to demonstrate some stuff. I don't want to have to insert content every time for demonstration purposes. Let's look at the service definition. This projects a regular modeling on the persistence layer as a service. So it's called the dumpster service. If I look at it, looks the same thing as before, right? It's an OData v4 service. What's behind it is also pretty easily shown. As I said, the model is on the DB layer. So look at this. There's an entity items. There's a field called content. There's a media type, name, file. I mean, you can read it yourself. But what this sort of shows now is two things. One, you can model on the persistence layer, then expose it via the service layer. And two, this is going to showcase something that most of you are desperately trying to do, that Gregor started initially, that Helmut, me, Gregor, and some others did in a mob programming session. It's doing content binary OData handling with a persistence layer. for storing binary data and for delivering binary data back to the client. You usually use this for, that's right, picture uploads. Yeah, or any other kind, PDF, whatever. And the entire showcase that I'm going to demonstrate here is based on this. So you now have an option to run a media server of sorts, full-blown, CRUD-based with a UI on top. So this is what this translates to. And what you're not finding in here is, as I said previously, the app instance. So there's no UI right here. This is just the service. How does the UI now, or how does the UI get hooked up to this? You can see, again, I'll leave it running down here. That's my cap instance. I now move to the UI5 app package directory. And in here, you'll see the web app folder, just as you know it from every other UI5 app. If I go in there, and I use the UI5 tooling to start up the UI, it delivers me the URL localhost 8080. If I click on that, you see the directory content first. If I click on the regular HTML file, you see a UI that describes a couple of things. So, first of all, you see an upload possibility. You see, or will see, a list of uploaded resources and a preview for showcasing everything around the media server of sorts with a freestyle UI on top. Now, on those two URLs, there's separate services running. How do I connect them? And this is the point where the UI5 extensibility comes into play. Before I connect those two, I want to enhance my development experience by, let's say, very common tools, such as live reload. Yeah? I don't want every time to reload things here with a Control-R or whatever you're using if my UI changes. I want this to be done automatically. So I take the UI5 YAML of my application, which is super basic, and I insert a custom middleware. And the definition for the custom middleware is always the same. You node server, custom middleware, you have a name, you describe when this middleware should actually like plug into runtime, and you have a certain configuration options array down here. So for the live reload server, it says watch all XML, JSON properties files, run on port 35729, and the path to monitor is web app. So everything in here that I change, it should pick up. If I now restart the server, you'll also see in the logging already, okay, live reload is plugging in at the right time. If I now reload the page, if I make changes to the page now, let me just put something in the headline, for example, which is here, UI5 con BE, and I save this, and I didn't do anything manually. The live reload server picks up the changes. So that's an essential thing for me. Even cross-browser, if you have a large target audience in terms of technical target audience, and let's say you have Brave, or let's use the new Edge, right? So if I connect this browser instance to the UI5 tooling, and I make changes in here again, and I save, it's picked up by both browsers. You see, it refreshes them automatically. And this makes it really convenient for me at development time to just be fast. And parts of the talk is not only how do I connect CAP and UI5 itself, also how does such an extension look like? You know, Mario said it's 20 lines of code. So in the repository here, you also find the source code, for example, for the live reload middleware. And in there, it's also pretty standard and recognizable for you. Every middleware extension has a UI5 YAML again that describes the middleware, most prominently the name. It has a package JSON describing what is used under the hood for implementing the middleware. So you see it's dependencies, blah, 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 blah. By the way, you can check out the repository anytime and like see for yourself what I'm doing right here. It's all published already. And the third part is, of course, the implementation. In the UI5 YAML of the extension, you specify where the implementation lives. So this is in the folder lib live reload. If I open this up, let's make this bigger so you can see. Up here, I'm just requiring a couple of NPM modules, so that's nothing spectacular. It gets interesting down here, how the implementation looks like. So there's always the thing that it has the signature of a function having an options object that has resources and options in there. And in options, you find the configuration things that you input in the custom middleware configuration in your application. So, and the rest is pretty standard. I start a live reload server under the hood at that port. I give it probably a debug instance, and then after some further setup, I say return the connect live reload instance of the server. So that's all there is to it. The only thing that you need to take care of, and you'll see this later in Peter's talk, is that this is not only as function signature provided by the UI5 tooling. This is also a standard function signature from the Express and Connect framework. So for those of you who've worked with that software or with that NPM module framework, however you want to call it, you know when you design a middleware, it has a certain function API, and you have to specify an end to a call or a next call to hand over the runtime to the next middleware. This is what the connect live reload does under the hood, so you don't see any calls to resource end here or stuff like next, which you would normally see if you develop the middleware in a standard way. Okay, everybody still with me so far? Okay, good. Now briefly shown how you extend the UI5 tooling for your development convenience. Now on to actually connecting the UI to services. There's this really, really simple middleware called Simple Proxy. If you look at the implementation of the Simple Proxy, it's really, really simple because it returns a proxy down here. And if you configure your UI5 YAML application file, or in your UI5 YAML, if you put a configuration for that proxy, you specify a mount path where that proxy, well, proxies the requests to, and where the endpoint for the request is. Now this is a friend of ours living in Norway, sub-champion, Ronny Sletta, if you're watching. He's come up with an API that returns always the latest UI5 versions. I've connected this to the UI in order to, up here, show the latest version that is available of UI5. So once the server starts, and if I now reload the application, you'll see that the proxy requests to the endpoint actually work and will, in a second, deliver the result. This is 174. So that's the point in time where I have connected my local UI to a remote service via the simple proxy. And the nice concept of the middlewares down here, or of the UI5 tooling extensibility, is that you can reuse the same middleware under different mount paths. So, see, I'm using again the UI5 middleware simple proxy, this time at cap, based on the URL where my cap application runs. Now if I save this, if I restart the server, and if I now rerun the application, you'll see that it connects to the cap application, and it actually delivers down here what's inside, or what that cap application provides in terms of content and services. I want to show you the setup for the Odata v4 model that is used, so you can actually see this, or even better. I'm first of all going to show you the raw items in here. So this is what's in the database, the media types, and this is the same in a custom list item display. And now if I click on stuff, I can see the preview on the right-hand side. How does the Odata model for this look like? First of all, you have the manifest JSON, you know that. So just as I have specified the mount path to cap down here, and over here I simply specify that endpoint as my Odata service. And in the UI itself, I simply refer to this as backend items. So this translates to cat dumpster items and delivers you exactly this. Okay, so far so good. So that already is a setup that I will reuse multiple times for developing new applications, because it's there. I just change the service and that's it. I do UI5 serve, good to go. For convenient purposes, or for convenience, I'll stop the UI right here. I'll stop the server right here. And if you go to the root folder, you see there's a package JSON, and it has a very short command for running both the UI5 application and the cap application in parallel. So instead of having to go to two different directories and starting things, I'll just say yarn dev cap, and that makes things simpler. It starts on a different port as well, but it's the same application, as you can see. So we're at that point now. I have this running locally. But if you think just a step further, what this enables you to do is have your UI running locally and connect it via a different middleware, CF destination, to a backend that actually runs on Cloud Foundry. You can even go so far and say, I can connect my UI via an SSH tunnel to a HANA instance running in Cloud Foundry. I did this with Mario's help on TechEd, so he can vouch for it. It actually works. And On the other hand, you can call up your UI and you can proxy your UI to your local application even. So you have all sorts of switch configurations at hand for testing out at development time certain setups. And with that capability at hand, I think the most important aspect is that you can then parallelize work. So you have the front-end guys working on, well, the UI, and you have the back-end guys working on the UI. Well, some of the time, this is both you. I don't think, or I have a very low opinion of the term full-stack developers, so I prefer this to be two different people, but, flavors depend. And your contract is actually the metadata or the service definition that CAP delivers. So let's say exactly this here. Your metadata right here is something that the front-end guys work against and the back-end guys work against. So this is the stable sort of contract that you have in order to parallelize work without one team interfering with the other. Now, of course, what's going to happen? People are going to commit features like crazy. Yeah, the tooling is out of the way. You can work everything, go, 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 git commit, and sooner or later things break. That's right, you need to introduce tests. And you need to introduce tests on both levels. So tests for the UI and tests for the service layer in order to always be sure there's nothing breaking when you commit new features. How do you do this? I've prepared both, and we have to hop over it, I think, pretty briefly because of time constraints. If you look in the folder test inside the UI5 app, you see two folders, API and E2E. And both use UI5 for testing the API and the entire front end. Now, how do you do that? Let me close our files here and open this one. In the config of UI5, you simply say profile API. And in your test itself, well, you write the test, which is standard syntax, nothing to cover right now. It says, hey, get me the URL and make sure there's the OData context property in there so I can make sure it's an OData service of sorts and not a REST-based service. This is just, of course, an oversimplified example. Yeah? If you run this, so yarn test API. This is for, oh. I forgot what the name of the script is. I think it's even, oh yeah, it's living up here. So it's in the root directory. It starts UI5 and with a headless instance of Chrome actually runs the tests. And you can do that at any time. You can enable a watcher or whatever. It will always do the testing of the API layer. So this, of sorts, fulfills the right part. Onto the left part, how does the end-to-end test look like? A little similar. You have a configuration file. And there's still a bug in the current UI5, by the way, that doesn't work with the local index bootstrapped from the UI5 NPM module, so I have to use the CDN here. But other than that, you say profile integration, because I don't like the screenshots to being saved all the time. I disable the screenshot reporter, and I provide the base URL of the application. And in the test itself, I define page objects that you guys should know from OPA5. this enables me to use that sort of spoken syntax. I can say then, given I start the app when, well, you can read it yourself, I upload a file, then blah, 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 there should be uploaded files. And the implementation itself is standard UI5. And because UI5 is at first glance hard to debug, I noted for you guys two different kinds how you write the test. So this is the shorthand UI5 form. You say expect something to be, but this is the actual promisified version that's easily debuggable because you can set breakpoints in here if something is wrong with the test. But they work exactly the same. This is just for your convenience that you can say how things look like. You can see how things look when you want to debug. And if I run this, this launches a separate instance of Chrome, actually uploads a file, and then makes sure the file is uploaded. And if I now look at the sample application, you'll see that there's another file in there that the test now automatically uploaded. So that's the UI5 logo. And that solves another common question that many of you have or might have is how do you upload files with an end-to-end test? Not possible with OPA5. At least I don't know how you would do that. Possible with UI5. And how does it work? You use parts of the underlying protractor API to identify the upload control and set an absolute path with the file you want to upload, and then you simply issue the upload. That's also in the code base, so you can take this as an example and reuse it. Okay, questions probably, but time constraints. So I think in summary, you now have the option to develop your UI locally, independent of your CAP application backend. You can test both. It's as a sort of blueprint of sorts in the UI5 ecosystem showcase. And overall nice, I'd say. Oh, and before you clap, there's one more thing. That's me. You can see my contact details if there's questions. The slides are already up on my GitHub repository. And there's the recap conference happening on May 15th. Yeah, at the headquarters of the company I work for. And we're going to focus on CAP this time, but there's also going to be a sneak preview on the new Fiori Tools suite that's coming out for Application Studio and Visual Studio Code. So that's it. There's time for questions, I think, officially, right?
Yeah, we have some questions now. So, without any?
I have a question about your separation.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at authorization to the data or business logic on top or below your server, because now you have the example directly, where will you put them in this?
So the question was, how do you apply authentication and authorization here? And there's essentially the capability of CAP to locally mock permissions. So you can describe in a static way roles and user accounts for the CAP application. If you then call up the UI, it will come up with a basic authentication dialog. So that's like very bare metal. If you were to put this into some other environment other than your local development, I'd always say you use an identity provider. Marius has a session today how you upload or how you consume a UI5 application from the application repository, where you can connect your identity provider to, and then you upload in the same Cloud Foundry subspace or space the CAP application, connect the same identity provider, and then you have the best of both worlds. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but it's also how you define, where should you define it?
So roles and accounts you define statically in the cap CDSR something.json or so. And the actual permissions you define on the service level with annotations. So you could reuse the same service here. The same service here as an admin service. And I think the annotation syntax is require, help me.
Column and then admin. Also Doppelpunkt. So I think there's no quotation mark before required.
Oh.
But the admin is in quotation mark.
Like this?
Yeah. And that would be the role admin.
Okay.
Role, but the scope of the role is admin.
Yeah, so if I now restart the whole thing, you'll see that on the service layer, there's two different services. And this one is easily accessible anonymously, just like before. And the other one here, if I click on this one, the definition is still public. But if I go to the items, oh, well, I'd have to redeploy. Let me quickly do this. Okay, there goes your question time. So, come on, come on, come on, come on. So.
Oh, because you don't have Passport installed. If you don't install Passport.
Okay, so in theory, this should give me an authentication prompt.
I had issues with the XUA as well, and we just checked in the .js file for the scope, and that worked.
Okay. Yeah, so, but I guess the principle is clear. You annotate the service, and you can reuse the same service with different permission. And you can even do this on a field level in CAP. All right.
Perfect. Thank you, Volker.